Good morning, North America. Welcome to Church Talk TV. Lively talk about life, church, and church life. I'm your co-host, Dr. Bill Tenney-Britton, and I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, Dr. Kris Tenney-Britton, and we're broadcasting from our studio in Columbia, Missouri, the heartland of America. Say good morning, Kris.
Well, good morning, and welcome to Church Talk TV.
Kris and Bill Tenney-Britton here today to talk about effective leadership selection. How do you choose the leaders for your church? You know, and we're not talking about clergy. We're talking about ministry leaders, volunteers, unpaid staff, that group.
Yeah, so I want to do, when we talk about leaders all the time, we've gotten tripped up and we've really played with this over the years. And that's to say, a lot of times we think of clergy and leaders. And so we want to think of clergy as leaders, but not the only leaders. So right. Often when we talk about leaders, we're talking about leaders in the church, both clergy and non-clergy. In this case, though, today, as you just said, we're not talking about clergy selection here, although it really can apply. We're talking about leader selection.
Leader selection.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I mean, to be fair, that is often in October kind of conversation.
Yeah, September, October,
the church I was at most recently when I retired from, they started the nominating committee, the leadership search, we got to have someone for panic mode in August because...
Yeah, I have seen it in June even, so they start to apprentice one another. I've been
Which is awesome practice.
I agree.
Awesome practice. But we want to talk about it now because leadership development and leadership selection is an ongoing thing. It's not a one-off thing. We want to be bringing in, raising up, identifying, coaching, and selecting leaders year-round as they pop up.
Right, exactly. So that when those positions pop up, which invariably they often usually do, that we're prepared with that. But also, I mean, eventually they're going to pop up and this is all part of that, right? We keep talking about apprenticeship over these years, about discipling. We talk about that over these years. And this is another degree of all of that, but specifically now about those, hopefully we've been apprenticing and we've been raising up. And now how are we going to choose those to be in the right places?
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. So one of the things I just want to point out is that there's a huge difference between a business leader and a church leader.
Yes.
A business leader, their bottom line, depending on the business, but normally is, profit. And I don't mean that at all pejoratively or negatively. That's what a business leader should do. That's to bring value to the customer and still make a profit. And if you're in a publicly held kind of organization, then to bring a profit to the shareholders.
Right.
You know that's their job.
Right.
Now, businesses, and including small businesses, they operate on the same basic principle. The church, unfortunately, far too often falls into the same kind of category where finances or those kind of operating concerns become the primary driving force of the congregation. Now, I just want to say that I don't know what size church you're in, obviously, because I'm talking to a lot of people. But here's the deal, is that probably your church is managing as many assets in terms of buildings and property and funding and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You're probably managing more assets than a lot of the small businesses in your city.
Right.
So there is a sense where good business acumen is a smart thing. Jesus even says that. I wish that the people of the light were a little brighter when it comes to managing money and managing what they have.
Right.
But exactly. There's the but. You want to run this?
Yeah, but the but is, with all respect to people out there, just because you're a good secular business leader doesn't make you necessarily a good church leader.
Well,
that there isn't that and again, hopefully and ideally, people we are being raised and our spirits are growing, our faith is growing, but more than just our faith, our ability to be disciples, followers of Jesus.
practices.
who let his light shine through us, whose practices, his practices, right, are what our guiding principles become. And yeah,
And our behavior should
well, that's
become,
exactly, that's
right.
what I'm trying to say. Yeah, our behaviors are the result of this change within us, or this way of living that that who we are is what we do, right? And unfortunately, a lot of what we do doesn't reflect who we want to be. Does that make some sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm always saying that just because that person works in a bank, or even I've seen this with a bank president, even though they're a bank president, it doesn't necessarily make them a good board chair or a good treasurer.
Right.
Maybe, I wouldn't even say that.
Or a stewardship chair.
Or stewardship
Right.
chair,
There's other criteria that you would want to look at. And
Right.
in fact,
That's what
that's what we're here to talk about. And,
Right.
and I want to say that one of my favorite passages for debunking pastor fetch and so on, it has been Acts 6:1 to 6.
love Acts
It's
6
one of
and
my
7.
favorite passages. And the reason why it's one of my favorites is because it so succinctly shows a leadership selection process that we miss so very often. And so we're not going to read it to you. I'm not putting it up on the screen. Go get your Bible and you can follow along in Acts 6 verses 1 to 6 we're going to look at.
Chapter 6. Let's be clear about that,
chapter
right?
6 verses 1 to 6.
The book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, 5th book of the New Testament, chapter 6, verses 1 through 6.
All right, and here's the synopsis of what's going on.
Okay.
All right, so the church has grown. Now, from Acts 1, we have a church of 120 people. They're in that first prayer meeting, 120 people. As far as we know, that's about how many folks they had in the church. Then comes Pentecost Sunday, and there's this.
And it's not a building church.
Right,
I mean,
yeah,
let's
yeah,
be
yeah,
clear,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I
right.
mean, it's a dispersed group that come together in the synagogues, right?
Except for in
worship.
this case, we see them in an upper room
Upper
because
room.
it was
Okay,
unsafe
that's
to
right.
be
That's
in a
right.
synagogue.
That's right.
at
Yeah,
this point.
exactly. Okay, so
Right.
but it's a kind of a dispersed, or I like to think of it as a house church. Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right.
Small
So
groups.
there's 120 of them though. Total 120 people. And then comes Pentecost. Peter preaches the sermons of all sermons.
Oh my goodness.
The Holy
If all we
Spirit falls
could.
upon the whole place, and they have 3,000 households come to Christ, say, what must we do? Get baptized. And the church went from 120 members to 3,000 households. And let's be honest,
Imagine that.
that it's 3,000 households. How many members is that? Well, if you just round it, I'm going to say probably a hubby, wife, and we're going to say one kid average. Okay, so that's 3. So in one day, they went from 120 to 9,000 people. 9,000 people. It became a mega church, a huge
Bigger
mega
than
church.
some of your little town that you live in.
Exactly.
Village.
So that happens, and things get going, and et cetera. And the church is beginning to take care of itself, and we get to chapter 5, the story of Annas and Sapphira.
Yes.
Our first crisis in the church. And the hypocrisy is not tolerated by the Spirit. But by the end of that chapter, they're no longer a church of 3,000. They're a church of 5,000. So when we get to Acts chapter 6, there are about 15,000 people associated with the church in the Jerusalem, Judea area.
Now I want to break in here, because you're going to correct me when I know that I'm going to be wrong, but hopefully we'll be right. I just want to back us up to the end of chapter 1, where it talks about how the church is, what the expectations now of this new movement, right? That's a church that they're taking care of one another. They sell possessions, individuals sell
that's
possessions.
in chapter 4.
Oh, darn, I thought it was chapter 2, and then I was
No.
guessing it. Okay, but
Well,
end of,
in
but
chapter
it's
2,
touching on all of that.
In chapter 2,
Go ahead.
they are heeding and listening to the apostles.
Right.
They're meeting and going from home to home.
And things are really great, and people are like, woohoo!
Right, yeah,
And so
242 to 47.
That's right. So
Right.
they're, my husband, the Bible scholar, and any of you taking New Testament with me next month, you didn't hear me say any of this. Okay, anyways, let's do it. I just don't
All
memorize
right,
very well.
so in
Okay,
chapter
let's
4,
go.
we have the whole story of Barnabas, and
Right.
he's selling his property. And
Right.
he's not the only one, but he's the
Nope.
one who's lifted up as doing it.
That's right.
So anyway, here's
They're
the deal,
taking care
folks.
of one another.
We get to Acts 6, and what happens? Well, there's 15,000-ish people, and in that 15,000 people, remember, there's no Social Security, no food, food stamps or anything like that from the
Pensions.
government, and so the church is taking care of its own. They are focusing on its own. They take care of each other, one another, and there's a food pantry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. What?
Well, I hate calling it a food pantry because people think, oh, the food pantry, it's where people from the community come to get food. But what we can't let out, what we really want, I think we want to stress, we talked about this earlier.
Definitely want to focus on it and remind you.
Yeah, is that these are people in the church. They're
Right.
not like having, it's not like
they weren't
a food
feeding all.
pantry.
It wasn't that anyone in Jerusalem could say, "Oh, I need some food."
Right.
It was for the members. They took care of the members,
right? They took care of one another.
That's right.
And in this case, specifically, what whom they're caring for are widows and children.
Widows and orphans. Right.
Okay.
And single moms. And probably that would be expanded to people who could not work.
Right.
The guy the ox
Who hadn't
gored
been
him
healed yet or whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Right. And that's so important because we spend more time trying to take care of the needs of everybody out there
That we forget
than the
about the
cares
needs in
of
the
those that
congregation.
are within
Right,
our congregation. So we want to make that real clear here.
However, there's a problem.
Yeah.
In this, and I'm going to continue to call it food pantry just for sake
Feeding
of
program.
feeding program, but the food pantry, and the food pantry is kind of messing up because apparently the Greek-speaking Jewish Christians, remember at this point everyone in the church is by and large a converted Jewish person. So the Greek-speaking Jewish Christians are not getting included completely, at least, in the distribution.
They're not getting as
daily
much.
distribution
Yeah.
of the food. And the Hebrew-speaking Jewish Christians are kind of doing pretty well. And so a delegation, apparently, probably from the Jewish side or the Greek-speaking side of the group, goes and pounds on the denominational door or the pastor's door and says, "Hey, you've got a problem. We need you to step in and we need you to run the food pantry so that everyone gets what they need to go."
You got to fix it.
That's right. You got to fix it.
Hey, pastors.
Right.
You got to fix it.
You got to step in and fix it. And the pastors, at that point, Peter and the rest, they stick their heads together and go, "Yeah, no." And so in Acts 1-6, we see 4 criteria for leadership selection in the church. They raise up people, leaders, to handle the problem. They refuse to put the monkey on their back. They say, "Whoa, hang on, this is a membership issue. We're going to let the members take care of it, but we're going to give you some guidance on how to make that happen."
Okay, so I just want to give a little twist to this story, and the deal here is that the apostles, right, the head of the church,
the pastors,
okay,
right?
the pastors said, that's not our job.
Right.
They said, our job is to pray and to teach. And so that's what we've got to be about. You guys, gals, well, they were guys. It's your job
they were
to
talking
be
to the whole church
serving.
at this
Well,
point, yeah.
right. I mean, everybody. And, my guess is definitely there are women helping with serving,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And,
Well,
and
we know
food distribution.
Philip's daughter was out busy prophesying and
so
whatnot,
there,
preaching.
the food distribution, not the food bank. Anyways, so, but it is, okay, they're real clear. These apostles, they're real clear. So pastors, here's that little piece here. This is why it's so important to me. Your job is to teach and to pray and to build leaders.
Right.
Okay,
and
go
so,
ahead.
And there's more to it than that, but we'll do
This
that
is
another
not what
time.
that's about. Yeah.
Okay, here's the deal. 4 tools that we find from Acts 6, 1-6, and we want to go through them because we're about halfway through the program, and we want to make sure we give each of them their due. Okay. So, number 1, effective church ministry is team-based. The pastors got together, and they said, what are we going to do? And they said, I got an idea.
Right,
we got
okay.
it. All right. So they went out and they said, listen, pick 7 folks. Pick 7. 7 is a lovely number. It's a good number. We don't know why they picked 7, but maybe because, if they were if this food pantry, this food distribution was going on, and let's just say 1% of the church needs food distribution. Was in need, right? 1%. That's 150 meals a day. Actually, it's not. It's 450 meals a day if you get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But there's 150 people, families, who are depending on this every single day. That's a big job. And so the apostle said, hey, pick seven people. It's a team-based ministry. And the reason team is so important in the church is because, folks, one person who has a ministry, that's their ministry. God bless them. It's not a church ministry. It's that person's ministry.
Okay,
go ahead.
So they have 7, and I think part of it is it's an odd number, right? So you've got the Greek-speaking Jews, you've got the Hebrew-speaking Jews, so there never could be, hey, they're this way or that way. You can take it.
Right. We have no idea how they divide it up.
Right.
We look at the names, and they're pretty Greek, most of them.
Yeah, that's true. And it is team-based, and I'm not sorry. I don't see Philip and the other guys and Stephen standing out there being the ones who hand out the food. They're the ones who are leading up that. Right, they're raising up other people. They're putting those teams together. So let's talk about that. They're not the ones.
They're not the doers.
They're
the
leaders.
Right.
They
divided up
the
tasks.
clergy, but
they're not standing
the
in there
leaders.
and serving the food. They may have now and again, but they did it to train others. Okay, that's
right.
That's,
okay,
again,
that's one.
We're training.
Yeah, but I want us to be clear.
So number one, effective church ministry is team-based. Any ministry you have in your church. So let's say Vacation Bible School. Boy, we do this a lot. We find one person who's a doer, someone who's they really love working, and they put them in charge of Vacation Bible School, and that person has trouble. Sometimes this is not always the case, but they'll have trouble recruiting a team, leading a team. I worked at a church once that they had a couple of gals who were really, really, really creative, and they put together a Christmas Eve service for the kids. And it was, like I say, it was fabulous. But these 2 gals recruited people from the church and got quite a group of people who were willing to help. And when they showed up 2 hours early to help set things up, these 2 gals had no way. They didn't know how to say, "Will you do this? Will you do this?" That I walked in, and the volunteers would come. They were standing off to the corner, and I was there when someone said to the person who was putting tablecloths on all the tables, these plastic tablecloths, said, "How can we help?" And this gal said, "I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out." As she's putting tablecloths on, it's like, someone else could do that. Yeah. You were doing something else. But doers do.
Right.
Boy, we need doers. But leaders lead, and they're able to go,
They delegate.
Yeah, they're able to say, this is what needs to happen. Hey, can you take care of that?
Right. They do, but their doing is delegating.
Right.
Right. I mean, you mentioned Vacation Bible School, and I remember the first Vacation Bible School that I put together, and I'd been, I'm a baby Christian. I can't believe they trusted me with this, and they sent me off to trainings.
Warm body with a pulse.
I mean, really. And I had a desire, and I wanted to serve the Lord, and I wanted something for our daughter, and so I went, and Kathy Mullins, bless you, Kathy, if you're watching this, like my dear, dear best friend, she was there with me, and we put it together. And if anybody, we had volunteers, but we had done everything. And I was so exhausted, and the day before it had started, and Mac Pittner, this woman in her 80s, she checked in on me. I was walking past her house. She lived up the street, and she said, "Come on over here and sit," because they had a front porch. So I sat actually on the stairs, and Max said, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm really tired." She said, my first Vacation Bible School, everything was ready to go. And I sat on my front stairs and I cried because I was so tired and exhausted. I couldn't even get there the first day. So, it is that they ask you, and you want to do well, you don't want to say anything, but please, if you're asked to lead anything, know that what you do is delegate and raise up other leaders, right? Okay.
So number one.
Number
Number
effective
two.
church leaders are disciples. This goes back to that. is that goes back to you may be a good business leader in the community, but that doesn't necessarily make you a good church leader. So are you being discipled? Are you
behaving like
are
a
you
disciple?
behaving like a disciple? Are you being raised? Are you allowing yourself to be mentored, discipled? Are you in a discipleship program? How's your prayer life?
And here's the point, is that never mind what you're doing, if you're on the selection team in the church, you're saying, are they in?
Yes.
Are they behaving
Right.
like this? Hey, this person's willing to be our treasurer. Do they behave like a disciple?
Right.
Do they have a spirituality? So let's go back to the first, the disciples, the apostles. They come out and they say, select 7 people who are they're filled with the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
They're spiritually centered and grounded. They're
And you
asking,
can see
first
it.
thing they're saying is, are these people disciples of Jesus? Because if
Right.
they're not going to serve in leadership.
Right. And the way to measure this, and we talked about this
Absolutely.
before.
It's measurable.
Yeah. First church I served as a solo minister, and the people in leadership were god awful, and we were in a nominating committee. I hadn't been there for very long, and we got to that point of, well, so and so said he would if you can't find anybody else. I'm like, well, we don't want them. Well, if they're willing, nope. If they don't want to, we don't want them. And some of the behavior, a lot of the behavior amongst people in leadership positions was atrocious. It was just ugly and mean. And so I took these little apple things, wooden
like
apples.
at Hobby Lobby.
Yeah, like at Hobby Lobby.
Right.
Yeah,
Little flat
little wooden.
ones,
yeah. And so I took the small ones and I wrote the fruit of the nasty, not I put on big apples, the fruit of the Spirit.
From Galatians 6?
Yes, yes. And then on all of the other ones, I put the nasty, rotty little things, and I turned it into
the fruit of the flesh.
Yeah. And it's the rotty, fleshy stuff. And so then, or the fleshy stuff that's rotting. Okay, anyways, and I made a mobile out of this. Now, anybody can do this because I am not creative at all and not handy dandy. I'm creative in my head, but making it come out. But I sat there with that nominating committee and said, okay, well, as we look at each person, what fruit do they have? Do they have any fruit, or do they have more rotty, fleshy stuff? And we just went through and started eliminating people, but then what that allowed us to do is to start to bring other people into leadership, and today I would say into leader preparation, development. Because they had such beautiful gifts.
Okay, so number 1, team-based ministry. Number 2, the leaders that you're raising up or want to put into the position, are they disciples of Jesus? I use a technical term. I talk about church members versus disciples. And don't get me wrong, some church members are disciples, and hopefully every disciple is a church member. But the bottom line is, when I say church member, I mean the people in the pews overall. And a disciple, they're the ones you want in leadership positions. Okay. Moving on.
3.
Number 3, effective church leaders have a history of making good decisions. The apostles say, raise up 7 among you who are filled with the Holy Spirit and are wise. Their wisdom. They have a history of making good decisions. I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, I was going to say,
bottom line.
That's enough, right? That's spot on.
And what gets us to number 4,
yes,
which is, go ahead.
Effective church leaders have a positive reputation. I'm going to place with that too. They have favor of people.
Okay.
Right? Do they have favor among the people? Do they have a good? Are they people of good repute? Not rapport, not ill repute, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right.
And that really kind of goes with the one that we just talked about, and actually the Holy Spirit.
Sure.
Are they spiritual? How do you know they're spiritual? Because we've seen them behave like a Christian. We've seen them behave when they get into a disagreement with someone. They don't lose their Christianity.
Right.
They are kind. They may be. This is how I really think it ought to be.
Right.
But they're not ugly. They don't call names. They don't say, "Well, I'm taking my bottles and going home. I'm going to quit. I'm not going to give anymore."
Well, if you have people
that's bullying behavior,
bullying and terrorism,
Yep.
right? I mean, if people are showing that, they're like off the consideration chart, right?
Yeah, they don't get to serve.
And
You don't
if
want
you
them
say,
in
yeah,
service.
but I love this. I think our son-in-law told the other day that whenever you say the word but, you negate everything that came
You said
before it,
before,
right?
yep.
So yeah, there is no but about that. If they're threatening
Well, yeah, but
to
but
this or
he's
not
got
do
a
that.
good heart.
Yeah, but
He just that's
but
it. There you go.
and maybe their life will turn around, but
Let's get it turned
that
around
doesn't-
before we
right,
put them in
that,
leader position.
That goes back to number 2, that
right.
they have to be disciples. So I do want to say about having a positive reputation. It's that and making good decisions and disciples. That it's not as much what they do. Because I was thinking, okay, you ask these questions of each person you're considering, and you might
Before
say,
you talk to them.
right? And yes,
Yeah,
that you're
yeah.
considering is a magic word there in big old capitals. That they're disciples, and so you ask, when have you seen them act as a disciple? And the question some people will answer, I can hear this in my head now, is, well, they
Come to church every
they
week.
come to church, they come to our prayer group, they do this. But the question
Attendance
comes back,
isn't a disciple.
right? And participation in Bible studies, and it's how do you see that? How do you know? What is it? And again, a positive reputation. What ugly have you heard? Now, people will say ugly things about me from time to time, believe it or not. And, I've been called, like somebody once called me many years ago and said I was opportunistic, as though that was a bad thing. I just was confused. But those things can, rub on a reputation. So you take that into place, and you look and you see, and what patterns do you see?
Right.
Okay.
Making good decisions, disciple of Jesus, and they have the team base, and they have a positive reputation. I want to say this:
go.
the positive reputation from it's important because we hope they have a positive reputation in the church. But do they have a positive reputation in the community as well?
Yes.
Do they wear their Christianity on as a Sunday morning hobbyist? Or do they take it and do they live it in the community? And
Right.
here's the last bit about having a positive reputation. If you have a positive reputation in the community and in the church, it makes it so much easier to raise up people to follow you if people go, I admire that person.
Right. I want to be like them.
I want to be like them. I really would like to
Yeah.
work with them,
Yep.
for them, etc.
Yep.
A positive reputation helps to build a church,
Yep.
folks.
Okay, so I have to jump ahead to chapter 7 in Acts, okay?
Yeah.
Because I love this. They go, chapter 6 and chapter 7 go together. And so really in the end of chapter 6, I mean, Stephen, one of those disciples, Stephen, he's
One of those
our
deacons.
deacons.
Yeah,
He's
one of
already
7.
started like speaking on God's behalf. And
He starts preaching.
Woohoo.
He builds his reputation in the community.
And he's showing his discipleship and
Right.
his faithfulness to not just this church, but to Jesus. That's where he's getting into trouble. And then it's now people are really ticked at him, so they start telling lies. The next thing you know, they're stoning him.
Right.
They stone
Our
him
first martyr.
to death. He is our first martyr. And but I love it because in some of our traditions, like the church disciples, well, no, I love it because in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and I know some other churches, Church of Christ, have deacons, and like deacons are those who help in baptisms or help serve communion
That's
and
right.
stuff like that, right?
They're plate servers.
But what we're talking about are leaders who are standing up, speaking out their faith,
living
right?
their
They're
faith.
living their faith. And not
in
all
the church
of you,
and outside the church.
right? And not all of you and not all the people in your church have that gift to speak aloud, to witness, if you will. But the depth of his heart and his spirit and his relationship with Christ. And the only other of those 7 deacons, the only other one that we hear about is Philip. And same thing with Philip.
Except
He
he doesn't
just
end up
speaks
dead.
out. Well, no, okay. Well, at some point he did.
Well, yeah.
But yeah.
He's talking about it.
But he spoke out and on behalf, not in a way like Stephen did,
He
but
did
in his
one-on-one.
own way. That's right.
He did it one-on-one.
Okay, I'm done
So
preaching.
here's the deal, folks, is we can learn a lot from Acts 6, 1 and 6 in terms of how do you raise up leaders in your church? How do you choose who serves? And I think we've given you a pretty good outline of what it takes this year as you begin looking for leaders.
And getting ready for
Right?
raising.
Look for people who have good fruit, fruit of the
fruit.
Spirit. They're disciples of Jesus Christ inside and outside. They have a history of making good decisions, and they have a reputation. People would like to be a part of their ministry.
Yes,
We are
of
out of
their
time.
lives.
It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.